Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about goaltending because we're looking at the goalie carousel yet again. The goalie carousel in the NHL does get going this time of year, and so we'll look at who's got stability and who probably has stability and who doesn't. So I'm going to go through this alphabetically. Apologize to the Winnipeg Jets fans, but you know who your starter is and who your backup should be for next year. So there you go. The backup is an unrestricted free agent. I expect him to stay, though. I'd be kind of surprised if he leaves. He had a very good year. So we'll start off with Anaheim. Ducks fans, you guys probably have the least amount of watch times for these videos. Just get through the Ducks and go, all right, yeah, turn that off. John Gibson, 18, 26, and 11 record, 904 save percentage. His cap hit, $6.4 million. Now, the one thing with Gibson, there have been discussions about how he doesn't like losing. He doesn't want to go through a rebuild. He doesn't really enjoy all this, and he's in his prime, right? So he wants to win. There's the possibility in the offseason that maybe that becomes a demand, but it hasn't yet. And you can understand his frustration. He is in his prime. He wants a chance to win a championship. So it is possible he gets put on the market, and then you look and see who can afford that $6.4 million cap hit or who might be able to do the cap gymnastics to make that work. But if the Ducks made him available, there would be teams that would be lining up to take him. Stolarz, 0.95, and so I just went with just two decimal places. So less than $1 million for Stolarz and Dostal. Should they go with Stolarz and Dostal, that would mean that their goaltending tandem would be less than $2 million under the cap. And Stolarz played well this year. His numbers weren't bad. So if they decided to give more starts to Stolarz, I don't think anybody would complain at this point. Arizona. Vejmelka is expected to be the starter. I just put the stats for the starters. He was 13, 32, and 3 with an .898 save percentage. His cap hit next year, $2.73 million. That's how you make it work. You go out there, you put up 45, 50 save nights, and the team decides to keep you around. Then you've got Setri, who is UFA, right? He just signed that contract with Toronto. Does he end up back in Toronto? Does Toronto circle back, or did his ugly numbers with Arizona, would that have possibly scared Toronto off? Kozanosh didn't end up playing a lot for them. It's part of the reason they ended up picking up Setri. So I think the expectation is Kozanosh is probably done. And Prosvetov, cap hit of $750,000. And yeah, Prosvetov, I think there's some potential there. Do you put him in as the backup? Arizona is expected to be pretty bad again next year. It's not expected to be great strides. They should be better than they were this season, but we'll see. Boston, things look pretty stable in Boston. While in Arizona, they might pick up another goaltender. Anaheim, we might see something happen with Gibson. In Boston, it looks pretty stable. The one thing is, Swayman, 26, 10, and 2, 917 save percentage. That cap hit, which again, 0.93, less than $1 million. Just less than $1 million is the important thing. When his contract's up, he's likely going to get quite the raise. I like Swayman a lot. Ullmark is there at $5 million for a while. So there's the possibility that Boston looks at trading Ullmark. There's been discussions of whether or not that might end up happening this summer. It's possible, and again, that's because Boston needs to make cap space elsewhere, Bergeron, right? So we'll see. Buffalo, who knows? All right, Anderson, 17, 12, and 2, 897 save percentage. He's an unrestricted free agent. Tokarski, unrestricted free agent. And Luukkonen, restricted free agent. Nobody signed. And if you're looking for Dell, also unrestricted free agent, I can't see him being brought back by the Sabres. Then you get to Calgary, things are pretty, other than me forgetting the K and Markstrom, pretty stable. So what I'll do, I'll just go ahead and fix that now. Markstrom, the way that the playoffs ended for him against Edmonton, not great, but his record 37, 15, and 9, 922 save percentage, $6 million cap hit. It is one of the higher cap hits among goaltenders. But with Vladar there making $750,000, your total cap is 6.75 between the two goalies. That's not bad, right? So Markstrom, is he a little bit high considering his playoff performance? Sure. Is it a good contract considering his regular season performance? Also sure. So yeah, I think for Calgary, things stay the same. Probably the same in Carolina as well, where Freddie Anderson, 35, 14, and 3, 922 save percentage. $4.5 million cap hit this coming season. The question mark becomes one of, can Anderson stay healthy? Ronta's his backup. There's also the discussion of whether or not Ronta can stay healthy. He makes $2 million under the cap next year. Kochetkov, for the record, $840,000 cap hit. And so we'll see whether or not Kochetkov gets into more games than they might want him to next year. Again, I expect Anderson and Raanta to be the tandem again, but they're both goaltenders that are known to get hurt. In the Chicago Blackhawks organization, could be a complete and total overhaul, right? So you got Lankinen, 8-15 and 6. He was the starter by the end of the year, 891 save percentage. He's an unrestricted free agent. Delia is an unrestricted free agent as well. I would be kind of surprised if Lankinen hits the market. Delia maybe, and then Soderblom, who didn't have a fantastic call-up, but honestly, Chicago wasn't great defensively this year. 0.88 is the cap hit, so less than $1 million for Soderblom, which makes sense. Minor league goaltender and all that. Chicago likely to make some changes in net. Then you get to Colorado. These guys are in the Stanley Cup final, right? But Darcy Kemper's an unrestricted free agent this summer. So 37-12-4 record, 921 save percentage. Francouz for next year, he's already signed for a $2 million cap hit. And with Francouz and the way he's played against the Oilers, and now they're in the final, and it may be Francouz again, although Kemper was the backup in their last game, so Kemper might start in the final. I think we've seen that Francouz is a pretty good goalie, which is good, because I've said that for years. He's just had injury problems. So it'll be interesting to see what Colorado does, what Darcy Kemper wants, and what Darcy Kemper actually gets at this point in his career. And then in Columbus, it looks pretty set, doesn't it? You've got Merzlikins, 27, 23, and 7, 907 save percentage, $5.4 million cap hit next year. I thought about putting down when their expiry is, but that doesn't really make a difference as to where they're starting. This is just about the offseason, not about next trade deadline, what's going to happen with the goaltending. Korpisalo, $1.3 million, did not have a great season. Tarasov, for the record, restricted free agent this summer. If Korpisalo has another rough year, don't be surprised if Tarasov is the backup sooner rather than later. In Dallas, where there's a lot of goaltenders, Hudobin's technically still under contract, but I don't see him coming up. So Ottinger, 30-15 and 1, 914 save percentage, restricted free agent this summer, as any Dallas fan will tell you. Got my Ottinger jersey here. He better not get stolen with an offer sheet from Dallas. I'd be surprised if that happened. Holtby, unrestricted free agent this summer. Same with Wedgwood. I would be happy with Wedgwood being brought back by Dallas. He played well after the deadline when they brought him in. And Ottinger and Wedgwood, while that's not a fantastic duo, I think it's not too bad. And it's a likely to be a pretty cheap duo. I would think Wedgwood, it wouldn't be an expensive contract. Ottinger, we'll see. Again, do they read into that series against Calgary and say this guy's going to be a bona fide top 10 goaltender and pay him as such? Or do you look at the regular season numbers and say, we'll give you a show-me deal, couple of years, maybe $3 million per, and we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see what Dallas does. Detroit, Nedeljkovic, 20, 24, and 9, 901 save percentage. Mixed reviews with Nedeljkovic, but his cap hit's $3 million. It's not the end of the world. Both Greiss and Pickard are UFAs this summer. So for Detroit, if they want to go out and get a goaltender, they can. And again, Nedeljkovic's cap hit is not prohibitive to that. If you look at the cap hit among goaltenders, his is relatively reasonable. He barely makes more than Vejmelka, who had an 898 save percentage and just the 13 wins. Understandably in Arizona, but still. Then Edmonton, and this is, of course, the big what's going to happen of the offseason. Smith was 16, 9, and 2 with a 915 save percentage. I've got him as the starter because in the playoffs he was. Koskinen, yeah, there's rumors he's signing in Europe. I haven't found anything where he actually has yet, but the rumors have been out there. And then there's Skinner. 0.75 is the cap hit on him, so $750,000. Is Skinner going to be the backup for Smith? Are they going to roll with that? What are they going to do? Ken Holland is going to go over this over the next little while here, but it could be Smith and Skinner. I don't know how people are going to feel if that's the case, because Edmonton has some cap issues. Florida, Bobrovsky, 39, 7, and 3, 913 save percentage, $10 million cap hit. It is high. That is a high cap hit. Spencer Knight, 0.93. I round up, so $925,000. I just put 9.93. I know what that means. So yeah, Knight, if that's the goaltending tandem next year, I think they'll be fine. I don't think the goaltending is why they didn't beat Tampa. I think there's other issues there. May just be an experience issue as well. So maybe they keep things the same and go for it again next year, right? So I don't expect any changes there. Unless, as has been rumored, they want to make some cap space for next year and maybe Bobrovsky hits the market. But officially, he hasn't as of yet. The Kings are going to be fascinating to watch. So Jonathan Quick, 23, 13, and 9, 9, 10 save percentage. He wasn't supposed to be the starter. Peterson's supposed to be hitting his stride. Peterson's cap hits $5 million a year. The expectation was he would be the starter, and it's not happening yet. Quick's cap hits $5.8 million. And so is Quick still going to be the starter next year? I would say with the fact that he was the starter in the postseason, yeah, probably. And so maybe that means Peterson ends up being on the outs sooner rather than later. We'll see. Peterson's, I mean, by a goaltending standard, he's still in his prime, but he's not like young. So again, we'll see what the Kings do and what the plan is. Minnesota, Talbot, 32, 12, and 4, 9-11 save percentage, 3.67 million is his cap hit. For Talbot, he was the backup come playoff time because Fleury was brought in. And so I don't know how that's going to affect things going forward. Does that mean Minnesota doesn't trust their goaltending? Maybe. Fleury's an unrestricted free agent. He's left the door open to coming back to Minnesota next year. He'll make up his mind on that very quickly. And so we'll see if Talbot and Fleury's their goaltending duo. And if it is, that's an older goaltending duo. And is that going to be enough? Or are we going to be talking about Minnesota in a year's time the same way we've been talking about the Oilers, right? So Minnesota has to make sure they've got the goaltending that really is going to help elevate this team, because it feels like Minnesota is on the verge of a nice long run. They didn't get it this year. Maybe it's next year. And I know if you're a Wild fan, you're saying, I've heard that one before. Montreal, Allen's the starter because we don't know Carey Price's status. 9, 20, and 4 with a 905 save percentage. His cap hit $2.875 million. I didn't round that one up. It's fine. You guys are all going to understand what I mean by this anyways. So both Montembeault and Primo were restricted free agents. Montembeault I didn't think was bad. I thought he was about average, so we'll see if maybe he gets $1 million contract. Primo needs some more time, I think, in the minors, but how much is he going to get? And Carey Price, if he's out, that's $10.5 million on LTIR. If he plays, that's $10.5 million on the cap. And then between he and Allen, that's $13 million in goaltending, which I'm pretty sure is the highest number on the board between two goaltenders. So for Montreal, $13 million in net, it makes things kind of tough, right, in other parts of the roster. Although with the cap going up by $1 million, maybe that helps. Nashville. So there was a lot of talk about Nashville the last time I talked about them. So I'm going to talk about it here. Saros is the starter, 38, 25, and 3 with a 918 save percentage. Now, Riddick, UFA, likely gone. Ingram, cap hit, 725,000. I round up to 730. I think it was 730 altogether. And 725 altogether, I believe. But Ingram, his regular season numbers weren't great. He had a very, very nice showing in the playoffs. Is that enough to win him a job over Askarov, who's coming in? And as a rookie, I do believe Askarov's cap hit is higher than Ingram's. And again, for Ingram, I would love to see him get that backup role, but I think it's going to end up being Askarov's. Be interesting to see what happens there. But UC Saros is planted in that net as the starter. He's not giving up a lot of starts. But maybe Nashville is going to realize this year, maybe they overplayed him. Maybe that's part of what happens there, right? New Jersey, Blackwood, 9, 10, and 4 record, 892 save percentage. Rough year due to injury. Is he still going to be the starter next year? $2.8 million cap hit, and then he's a restricted free agent next year. So I really don't know with New Jersey's goaltending what's going to happen. Bernier, who may not play again, $4.125 million is his cap hit. And then there's Dawes, Nico Dawes, $850,000. Does he end up being the backup next year? Would they be comfortable with Blackwood and Dawes? Probably not. I would think if they want to return to the playoffs, they'd be looking for a more experienced goaltender to do what Bernier was supposed to do before he got hurt. So New Jersey's going to be one to watch in the offseason. And again, I don't know if Blackwood's... We'll see if he has that bounce back year. He was, and again, I understand he was influenced by injury, but he didn't have a fantastic year. Islanders, their goaltending combines for $9 million, and it also is very stable. Sorokin, 26, 18, and 8 with a 925 save percentage. $4 million cap hit, and I've seen his name get mentioned a lot as a guy who got snubbed for the Vezina this year. And Varlamov, $5 million. And again, I would think it'll be goaltending tandem, start one, and just back and forth. Although without Barry Trotz behind the bench, that could change. Maybe Sorokin plays more, and maybe that affects things too, right? Sometimes goaltenders do really well with a heavy workload, and sometimes they don't. So we don't know with Sorokin whether or not adding a heavier workload is going to help his numbers improve or not. Rangers, Shesterkin, who could be mayor of New York right now, governor of the state of New York if he wanted to be, 36-13-4 record, 935 save percentage this season. His cap hit of $5.67 million. What's interesting is at the time he signs that contract, I saw comments about how he hadn't played enough to really justify that contract. Now that contract looks like a bargain because you can make the argument that Shesterkin right now could be the best goaltender in the league, and he's still getting into his prime, right? So whether it's Vasilevsky, whether it's Shesterkin, the fact that we're even having the conversation tells you this kid's special. And then there's Georgiev. He's a restricted free agent this summer. There's been rumors about Georgiev being moved. If they're going to move him, it has to be a team that can make a deal with him, or maybe they make a deal with him and they move him. We'll see what happens, but I don't think they go with that tandem again next year, even though it was relatively successful this year. And again, by relatively successful, I mean Shesterkin played lights out. And Georgiev, well, he had some rough patches. I thought he had an overall decent season. Ottawa, Forsberg, he's the starter, right? 22-17-4 record, 917 save percentage, and he makes $2.75 million next year. But Matt Murray, the cap hit of $6.25 million. Gustafsson, 0.79 is his, so he's less than $1 million. And I know I talked in a recent news video about how they're willing to carry 3 goaltenders. I would be very surprised if Murray doesn't get waived. Unless Murray has a fantastic training camp and he's just great and he's going to be the starter, I would be very surprised if they don't waive him. Because with that $6.25 million cap hit, I don't think anybody touches him. I think he can pass through waivers easily. It might be a situation where maybe they waive him at the start of training camp, and then he's already cleared waivers, so you can keep him. You can move him to the minors. You don't have to put him on waivers again for 30 days after. But I would be very surprised if they carry 3 goaltenders. Philadelphia, the only one under contract that played this year is Hart. 13-24-7, 905 save percentage. His cap hit $3.98 million. Now, Fedotov signed 25 years of age, cheap contract. Since he's 25, Jones is a UFA. Sandstrom is a UFA. I would honestly be kind of surprised if they don't. And again, Hart and Fedotov tells you they might be looking at 2 relatively inexperienced goaltenders. Are you comfortable with that? If you're Philly, if you're looking to bounce back. But if they're going to go into a rebuild and do a proper rebuild, then yeah, 2 young goaltenders could be just fine. Be interesting to see what they do during the summer. I'd be kind of surprised if they don't either find a way to bring Sandstrom back, maybe Jones back. Just, you want to have 2 experienced goaltenders. What we saw this year a lot was goalie depth being tested in the National Hockey League. Pittsburgh, Tristan Jarry's net, right? 34-18-6, 919 save percentage, $3.5 million is his cap hit. What a difference a year makes. A year ago, we were talking about how badly he played in the first round and whether or not Pittsburgh could trust him. And now I don't think that's an issue. That being said, DeSmith and Domingue are both UFAs. So Pittsburgh's in a position where, yes, they could bring back Marc-Andre Fleury. It could happen. I'm not saying it will, but they could, right? So Fleury's UFA. They have an opening at backup goaltender. Possible Fleury ends up back there. So we'll see what happens. San Jose, Reimer, 19-17-10 with a 911 save percentage. He had an iffy year at parts. He had a great year in other parts. And the $2.25 million cap hit, it's not bad. Aiden Hill has a $2.18 million cap hit. I don't think they're keeping him because Kakkonen came in, and by the end of the year, Kakkonen's numbers with San Jose were pretty good. He's an RFA, so he's got to get paid. And I think they're going to pay him. And then there's Sawchenko. Sawchenko, when he got in, I thought Sawchenko was decent as well. He's an RFA too. So there's a lot of options here for San Jose with goaltending. Since other teams are looking for goaltenders, like for instance a Buffalo, you might be able to offer Aiden Hill to a team like Buffalo, and maybe they take that, right? But we'll see. Aiden Hill, again, rough year for him overall. It'll be interesting to see what San Jose does with that contract. Seattle, who of course get dramatically affected by the World Championships. Drieger won't play, so that $3.5 million goes on to LTIR. Grubauer remains the starter. 18-31-5, 889 save percentage, $5.9 million is his cap hit. So if they get off to a slow start and they wanted to move Grubauer, it would be difficult at that cap hit, even though he's got a pretty decent resume there, right? But without Drieger, I don't think there's going to be any changes in net. Decord, probably the backup. $750,000 his cap hit. I'd be kind of surprised if Decord's not the backup. But it's a decent market. There's some names out there. Seattle might be able to grab somebody who's going to be on the market as a UFA. And then you get into St. Louis. St. Louis is very interesting. Very interesting. Ville Husso, 25-7 and 6, 919 save percentage. Now, I have him listed because he was the starter, and he was the starter going into the playoffs. Binnington did come in, played very, very well, but I still think Husso, because of the good regular season he had, it makes sense for Seattle to bring him back, or St. Louis to bring him back. If he became a free agent, it's the kind of guy Seattle might pick up. But he's a UFA, and so they're going to have to pay him. They're going to have to pay him based on the season he had. 25 wins is good. Binnington, he makes $6 million. So Husso, what would his cap hit be? 3.5. And if Binnington's in 6 and Husso's 3.5, that's $9.5 million. And I'm just spitballing the idea here. Lindgren, if you want Charlie Sideburns back, he's a UFA, so they'd have to work out a deal with him. Odds are it'd probably be league minimum. But so Husso, Binnington, there's going to be that question of what does St. Louis do? You're not going to want to let Husso go as a UFA. So, again, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Tampa Bay, you have Vasilevsky, 39, 18, and 5, 916 save percentage, $9.5 million cap hit. Now, $9.5 million is a lot of money for a goalie, but it's Vasilevsky, arguably the best goaltender in the league over the last, I'll say, 5 years. So the $9.5 million cap hit, not a problem. You look at some of these games he's stolen in the playoffs. That's why he makes that money. And the Conn Smythe and the 2 Stanley Cup rings, they're trying to get a third. You got to pay for that. And then there's Elliott, who's coming back next year, $900,000 contract. So combined, they make over $10 million. Most of that's Vasilevsky. I think he's picking up the checks when they go out for dinner together. So, I think Tampa Bay is pretty set in that. The fact that they've re-signed Elliott, he's staying. Toronto. Toronto's always interesting to watch anyways, right? And so when you have all that media attention on top of it, it just makes it more fascinating. Campbell's a UFA. 31, 9, and 6 record, 914 save percentage. What is it worth? Is he a goaltender that can win for the team in the playoffs? Can he get them over the hump in the playoffs? I've seen people say, well, bring in Fleury. Fleury hasn't got a team over the hump in the playoffs for a while either. And Fleury's older. So I think there could potentially... Now, I'm not saying they don't bring in Fleury. I'm just saying there's some peril to that idea as well. Older goaltender, more likely to get hurt, that kind of thing, right? So Campbell, what's he worth for how long? There's talk of Mrazek and whether or not he might end up somewhere else. That $3.8 million contract, nobody's taking that for free. So you're going to have to give up a prospect, a draft pick, or keep some of that money, and Toronto would rather not do that. And then does that open the door for Shalgren? $750,000 cap hit for him. Does Wall get a chance to be the backup? Or does Toronto decide we're going to go in another direction, we're going to do something crazy, and maybe one of the other names on this board here ends up being a Maple Leaf, right? Vancouver, I think they're set. I think Vancouver's set for next year. Demko, 33, 22, and 5, 915 save percentage, $5 million cap hit. And again, at the time he signs that contract, there was some discussion about whether or not he deserved it. Nobody's making that argument now that he may not deserve it. And Halak's a UFA. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's not coming back. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's not coming back. And Spencer Martin, $760,000 cap hit approximately for the next 2 years. So they're goaltending less than $6 million for both. I don't think Martin's going to live up to the expectations of some Canuck fans. He played great when he got called up. He's a good goaltender, but he's not going to make you forget Demko, and you'd rather keep him as the backup. So if something happens with Demko, a little nerve-wracking if Martin had to be the starter, and then Seelovs would end up being the backup. So we'll see what happens. DiPietro ends up being the backup, and while we're at it, if Martin's got that job and DiPietro doesn't, what's going to happen with DiPietro? Does DiPietro stay in the Canucks organization, or does Patrick Allvin decide to move him, right? He's still a young goaltender. He can get it going. Maybe it just won't happen in Vancouver. Vegas is going to be interesting to watch. Leonard, 23, 17, and 2, 907 save percentage, $5 million cap hit. Is there a chance that Leonard doesn't stay in Vegas? It's Vegas, so sure. There's a lot of players who've left Vegas that we didn't think would, so it's possible. It's not probable, but it's possible, right? And that would leave Logan Thompson, who has a cap hit of less than $1 million, less than $800,000, potentially being the starter. Honestly, the way that Logan Thompson played last year, I wouldn't blame Vegas if they decided to make him the starter. This is one of the cases where Vegas gambled and won. Thompson was excellent, and Brossoit, 2.32 is the cap hit for him in millions of dollars. And so if it was Thompson and Brossoit, as crazy as it sounds, that might be an okay tandem. Maybe Leonard does end up out. If it's Leonard and Thompson, does Brossoit end up going out? Because Thompson's a pretty good goaltender, and I think he sticks around. So I think he's going to be in the tandem one way or the other. Then you get to Washington. Uncertainty. Both goaltenders are RFAs. How much are they worth as restricted free agents? Samsonov, 23, 12, and 5, 896 save percentage. The fact that they used him in the playoffs more than Vanacek tells me they trust him more than Vanacek. He is seen as having the higher upside than Vanacek as well. And honestly, for me, they were close. They were close throughout most of the season. There were times where Samsonov was better, or Vanacek was better, or both of them were mediocre, or both of them were good. And so they've got to sign these guys and then figure out what they're going to do. I don't think they'll be overly expensive, and I would expect them to be bridge contracts of probably 2 or 3 years, right? Although they may decide with Samsonov, we believe he's going to be the future in that, and we're going to give him a longer-term deal. Possible. And then you get to Winnipeg. As I promised Jets fans, almost 26 minutes in. Hellebuck, he's not going anywhere. $6 million cap hit, a little over $6 million, 6.16 million. 29, 27, and 10 record, 910 save percentage. His numbers were down. By his standards, not a great season. Comrie was pretty darn good as a backup. Comrie outplayed Hellebuck for parts of this season as well. And so if they can sign Comrie, keep him on the team, I think that's a good call. I think Eric Comrie has finally reached that level where he's comfortable in the NHL and he's playing well, and I'd like to see him stick around. So, which goalie moves where? Who ends up signing the UFAs? Does Darcy Kemper stay in Colorado? For how much? The Avs at some point are going to have cap problems. I've talked about this for the last 2 years. The Avs have had tons of cap space, and I think Joe Sakic was looking down the road and not wanting to take on a big contract because he understood eventually that cap space is going to disappear. So we'll see what these guys get. Let me know your thoughts. Which goalies move? Which goalies stay? I really enjoy the goalie carousel. I got to be honest. I enjoy it. What's interesting is that, again, the 3 teams that I root for, Boston, Dallas, Vancouver, and that's what order they're in alphabetically, all 3 of them have a good young goaltender that they can rely on as their starter. And backup-wise, 2 of the 3, we'll see what happens. Again, it should be Martin in Vancouver. It could be Wedgwood in Dallas. Boston, well, it could be Ullmark, but again, that cap hit, did they move it? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.